Former President Donald Trump was indicted today for trying to overturn his loss to Joe Biden.
We have to win in November, or we're not going to have Pennsylvania. They'll change the name. They're going to change the name of Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvanians have a unique role with democracy and freedom. We have seen Pennsylvanians rise up at the ballot box.
The work of making this world resemble one that you would prefer to live in is a lunch pail job.
One of the fundamentally frustrating and maddening traits of Donald Trump is his seeming inability to tell the truth. So when he does tell the truth, you think we would be happy. But in this instance, I think it's more like it's time to be terrified. Welcome to the Keystone Reckoning Podcast. Those of us that are ready for this election to finally be over on election day need to adjust our expectations. Because as I've become increasingly convinced, November 5th is just the beginning of this, not the end by any means. And every single thing that is out there is reinforcing that what I think at this point is just an absolute fact. And it's so bizarre because the Republicans are basically laying the groundwork for it and talking about it in such a brazen way, kind of like in plain sight, that maybe they think that people are too dumb to see what's going on. And to be honest, maybe people are too dumb to see what's going on. I mean, you look at where we're at. It's hard to look at where we're at in this election and then make the argument that we're a nation of intelligent people. It's kind of a difficult argument to make. So what are we talking about here? This has to do with the plan that is becoming increasingly clear of how Trump is going to try to steal the election, claim victory, however you want to call it, regardless of the outcome. All the pieces are there. And what is happening now as we get down to it, you're starting to see those gears kind of move into motion, the machine's starting to churn itself up. Because unlike in 2020, where they weren't quite ready and didn't have all the pieces in place, they clearly have a much more robust set of options in place this time. I think there are multiple paths to try to make this go. And I don't know how many of them we are in a position to be able to address through either just being aware of them or having the legal wherewithal, the structure in the courts or whatever to be able to stop them all. So they're taking a strategy of throwing a bunch of things up against the wall and seeing what sticks. So, for example, one of the biggest stories was the Georgia Board of Elections coming out and passing these insane rules saying that they kind of empowered themselves, or any county board of elections had the ability to, in effect, bring the counting of votes to a grinding halt, which would then allow them to miss their certification deadline, which would then throw everything up in the air. And I want to be clear, this is the ultimate goal, okay? All of these roads are leading to one path, which is they want to subvert the popular vote. So either Congress, which would just be the House of Representatives, or the state legislatures would be empowered to decide the electors for the Electoral College. Okay, that's it. And I'm going to do another episode soon that is truly terrifying about a video that was out there of someone that's in Trump's orbit, who was in a weird way connected to the shooter, the would-be shooter in Arizona that they stopped. I mean, it's one of those things where if I didn't have everything in front of me, I would sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not. All roads lead to not letting the popular vote determine the election. And I don't mean the national popular vote. I mean the statewide popular vote. And that's being done in a variety of ways, through voter disenfranchisement, by taking people off the voter rolls, all these different things. And what they're doing is they're planting seeds of doubt, and they're giving themselves opportunities and things to point to as a precursor to claiming the election was stolen, that the Democrats were cheating, that it was illegitimate. That's how then they can, in response to that, then they can, quote, stop the steal, right? They're almost at that point, they have been wronged by the government and by the deep state. Therefore, they are now, in their minds, entitled to do whatever they want to try to fight that, to try to reclaim what is being taken from them by, taken from real Americans. So it takes a lot of different forms, but you're seeing it. There was something in Pennsylvania where there's treading on Twitter an argument about how Governor Shapiro made the comment today that it will take days to count all the ballots. And they're immediately saying, oh, that's fraud. They're tagging all the Trump lawyers and saying, well, here we go. That's our cause for challenging it. What they're not telling you, and what I think, quite honestly, most of the people that are screaming fraud, and the non-political operatives, what they don't realize is the problem that with getting all the votes counted on election day is by design from the Republicans. Pennsylvania specifically, what they're talking about is pre-canvassing of votes. So with all of the votes coming in by mail, and nationally we're up to about 1/3 of all votes cast in America being cast by mail. So you mail your ballot in and it sits at the at the Board of Elections in your county. And they, you get a notification that's been received, but then it just sits there until election day. And by law, they are not allowed to start to open those ballots until 7 a.m. on election day. So they can't start opening mail-in ballots until the polls open on election day. And pre-canvassing is just that. It's pre. So what they're doing is they're opening up the envelope, the mail envelope. Then they're taking they're still keeping the security envelope. They're verifying that that matches the person it was supposed to go to. They are able to make the ballots smooth out so they can actually go through the counting machines. It's all the mechanics of being able to count votes, because that takes people and it takes time. And there was a proposed law that actually passed the House back in May. It's a very smart piece of legislation, it's very common sense, that it would allow pre-canvassing to start 7 days in advance. So in essence, the County Board of Elections could have the ballots ready to go because they'd have 7 days to get them ready. And then they could run them through the machines to get their tabulation and get a much clearer, more timely result. And that bill is sitting in the state Senate, Republican controlled. And it has been made very clear, according to a report, that Trump and Trump's allies have told those Republicans, block that bill, do not pass it. Same thing going on in Wisconsin. Almost the same exact situation. Republicans stopping legislation from being passed that would address the very problem they are complaining about. Because they don't want the solution, they want the issue. Because it gives them the ability, because that explanation I just gave you took like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. It's so much easier to be like, well, it's going to take them days to count the votes, so therefore it's corrupt, right? They want the easy answer that's going to get everybody whipped into a frenzy, even though there's a perfectly logical explanation, not that the Trump supporters would listen to it or believe it if they did. You can literally show them the statute and they still wouldn't believe it. That's where we're at right now. So you've got that kind of stuff going on. You have a situation in Virginia, another big potential swing state, where the voter vote rolls, Glenn Youngkin, crazy conservative governor of Virginia, they did a big purge of the voter rolls, and it got challenged in court, and the court said, no, you can't purge, you can't take these people off the voter rolls. And of course, Trump, who did an interview with the Chicago Economic Club, which we'll talk about again in a minute, but in it, he was asked about something totally unrelated, and he started talking about this Virginia decision, and it's terrible, and it's, and a lot of people are saying, and I wish a reporter would look at Trump and be like, you always use the phrase people, or lots of people are saying. Could you name 3? He couldn't do it. The only people saying this to him are the sycophants around him and the voices in his head. Anyway, so they're crying foul that all of these people are now illegally, in their words, going to be able to vote in Virginia because, they wouldn't have let them take, illegitimate voters off the voter rolls. However, and you'll see a theme developing here, by law in Virginia, any adjustment or purging or whatever you want to call it to the voter rolls has to be more than 90 days before an election. Presumably, so those people who had been purged from the voter rolls, many of whom, and the reporting is voluminous on this, are taken off incorrectly. That way they know about it far enough in advance, or at least if they go to check the registration or apply for a mail-in ballot, Wait, I'm not registered to vote? Okay, let me re-register. It gives them time to correct the state making a mistake or maybe doing it on purpose. Who knows? That would disenfranchise them because it's not hard to envision who they're taking off the voter rolls, right? So that was their big thing. But the governor of Virginia, you'd have to figure either by malfeasance or malpractice, one or the other. Either they didn't know what the law was and they tried to do it anyway, or they knew and they wanted the issue, right? And that's kind of, if you think about it, that's almost scarier. Instead of getting those voters off the rolls, they were like, no, maybe we want the issue because it gives us, again, more reason to cry foul. And because if you're crying foul in one state, that's one thing. But what have we already talked about? Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Virginia. You think that's a coincidence? That's just off the top of my head. There are more out there. And I'm sure there are more to come. But the recurring theme here is they are doing things, forcing issues that require the law to be enforced, and then using the outcome that they have in fact engineered as a precursor or an excuse to claim that they're being wrong somehow. This is not that hard to see. This is not hard to see at all. And I bring that up because in the Rolling Stone piece, they come right out and say, which those of us that have been watching this have seen for a while now, and it's kind of a repeat of 2020, but it's going to be much more dramatic, or theatrical on their part, and it's going to be well orchestrated. And you've seen it. Trump basically screaming that the election has been stolen from him before anybody started counting ballots. That's not an accident. He's setting the stage. So that way he can now declare, and this is what it says, according to 4 conservative attorneys, I'm reading from Rolling Stone now, 4 conservative attorneys and other sources who have spoken to the former president, Trump intends to declare as soon as on election night that the race is being rigged or stolen from him by pointing to slow vote counts of mail-in ballots in crucial battleground states as his evidence for supposed Democratic shenanigans afoot. Sound familiar? I think you only have to go back about 3 minutes to get where we were at with this. That's the plan. Straight away, that's the plan. And it's not hard to see what they're going to try to do. And it says Trump in these private conversations has stressed that, quote, you got to call them out very early in the process, like that night, otherwise they can get away with it and cover their tracks. Now, they are Democrats, but also elected election officials who I think we can all agree, for the most part, held their ground and did their jobs 4 years ago, Democrat or Republican. But that's the pressure point, and it's all to bring about this idea of chaos, right? They want chaos. And chaos is the thing that will allow them to mobilize their supporters who are spoiling for a fight. And they're going to try to wear down Democrats through a war of attrition. We saw it in 2000 with Bush v. Gore. Karl Rove going down to Florida, sending people in buses to put pressure. This is going to be that times a million. Think about it. The guy that engineered that isn't supporting Trump, right? That's how far we've gone from that. So this is what we need to be ready for. This is all leading up to not a call to action. It's leading to a call to war. Their words, not ours. For example, we've been getting Republican mailers for some reason, and I'm holding one right now I got today. And on the front of it is literally 3 words: fight, fight, fight. And in the background is a picture of Trump's arm raised during the shooting in Butler. Think about that for a minute. That's the message to voters. Fight, fight, fight. Got a message from the Democratic Party today. It says, your vote matters in this election. See the disparity here? We are not playing the same game. Now, the other piece of this has to do with the polls. And it matters because for a lot of reasons, I'm not believing these polls this year, especially. I've done polling. I know how to read polling. It's, first of all, anybody that's talking about a national poll can just get out of my face because we don't have a national election. They're pointless. They're worthless. Statewide polls matters because we don't have one presidential election. We have 50 presidential elections. That's the way this country is built, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's the way it's built. So, okay, you're going to give me statewide polling. That's fine. But all of these polls that are like, within a percentage or a 0.5% or whatever, they're pointless. They're all within the margin of error. I've got numerous calls for polls. I always take them. You get a couple people like me give a different answer. There's your percentage point because it's all weighted. Even if they do it right, it's a weighted response. If you're within the margin, now I'm much more inclined to believe that Bob Casey is beating the living daylights out of Dave McCormick because the disparity there takes you outside the margin of error. And generally speaking, if a poll is done right and it's modeled right and all the things, it can be a viable barometer of support. I've had elections where I was the candidate. I saw internal polling, and it played out almost to the exact percentage. I think that's a lot more difficult in a national race or when you're dealing with such a large group of people. And I also think that in this election, we've talked about this before, people are not inclined to say who they're voting for because they're afraid to say it. Either because they don't want to get in an argument or they're just kind of afraid to say out loud because, again, the mailer I got today, fight. That's who we're dealing with. And that's intimidation. They're doing that on purpose. That's a feature, not a bug. So they don't want to necessarily tell a pollster who they're supporting. So for all those reasons, I'm inclined to not want to buy into polls. The other reason being that now we're going to get into the more nefarious part of it. Because there are legitimate pollsters out there, and that's a staple of American politics. I get it. That's fine. And they can be informative. But the thing that blows me away is the fact that what we're seeing now, so someone decided at some point that one poll could be better than the other, or might not be accurate. So they started to do this average of polling, this aggregate, right? So the Real Clear Politics does it. It's like this rolling. They take all the polls and they combine them together. And the idea being that you get a more accurate result because you've put more polls together and they should be stronger statistically. Not a bad theory. However, what it allows for is and Republicans have done a good job of this, they flooded the field with far right-leaning polls. Rasmussen poll is is kind of the gold standard, I guess the red standard of, a Rasmussen poll is just, you have to laugh at it coming out of the gate because it's always going to favor the Republicans. It's always skewed to the Republicans. There are other polling firms out there. They are flooding the field with garbage polling in an effort to bring that percentage down. So here's the narrative on election night. Trump and everybody else stands up and says, we were neck and neck in the polls. We were winning some of the polls. We were winning on election night because if you remember, mail-in ballots come in big chunks later because they have to be counted. Because you can't start counting them until 7 a.m. So what tends to happen is you get election night voting or election day voting comes in first, and then there's a big dump of mail-in ballots. Again, it's how the system's supposed to work. If it didn't happen that way, something would be wrong. But to someone that wants to believe there's something nefarious at foot, that there's skullduggery taking place, Trump is winning by big percentages. And, because a lot of times people will see a percentage of the votes on TV or whatever, but they don't realize of how much of the electorate is in, right? To anybody that knows this stuff, it's like, well, what counties were in, right? I don't care what the percentage is. Nothing else mattered because they were going to do what they were going to do. So you've got this scenario where Trump is going to say, oh, you were watching all night, especially because remember, the majority of election day voters are the Republicans. The majority of vote by mail folks are Democrats, right? So here we go. You've got Trump is up big on when the polls close because people again think that, the minute the polls close, the election's over. Trump's up big when the polls close. He's winning. Then all of a sudden, boom, he's losing because Philadelphia came in, right? Or it's neck and neck, but there are more votes that are going to come in after the polls close, even though those were legally cast ballots. And usually those were actually ballots that were cast before polling places open, but they couldn't be counted until late because the Republicans won't change the law. So you've got the numbers, to someone that doesn't know any better, support this narrative. The polling being so close allows Trump to come out and say, we were winning in the polls. We were right there. It was so close. We were neck and neck the entire way through. And now Kamala Harris is up by 3 points and votes came in late, yada, 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 storm the state capitol. And that's one of the other things we're going to talk about later is this, That's what they're talking about. Just to be clear, this is setting up for not necessarily a January 6th. It's setting up a bunch of January 6th in state capitals in battleground states all over the country. That's where this will end up. And given that, state legislators are, they're very interested in staying in office. They're not interested in necessarily stepping up and doing what's right politically, especially when it's their own party. And again, some of the things I've heard, not heard secondhand, I've watched the speeches where they're basically like, we're going to attack the Republicans and make sure they do right by us. Like, we need to get them on board, and then we'll turn to the Democrats. This is well thought out. This is a plan. This isn't going to, anything that happens here, there's a phrase that says anything that happened in politics is never by accident. This is the epitome of that. None of this is an accident. None of it. So when it all starts to happen, don't let anybody say the signs weren't there, because that's what they're going to do. Because I truly believe, given anecdotal things I've heard on the ground, things I've seen online, conversations I've personally had, I think that in these tight battleground states, and I'll just use PA as an example, I think Kamala Harris wins Pennsylvania, not as a landslide, but I think she wins it comfortably. I think she wins it to a point where it would be very difficult to legitimately challenge the result. I don't think she'll win it by enough that they're not going to be able to try. They're not going to do it. But I think that in any other year, in any other election, it would be they would call Pennsylvania for Kamala Harris, and that'll be it. And by the way, this cannot be overlooked. When the one of the big questions is, and I think this has to do with criticism of the mainstream media about how they've kind of given Trump a million passes, and that's a discussion for another day. But when will they call these states? If we go later into the night and there is clear evidence that Kamala Harris wins Pennsylvania, but nobody wants to call it, like nobody outside of like MSNBC, right? Steve Kornacki is a man on an island calling it in his khakis, but everybody else is like afraid. That will only reinforce the uncertainty and open up the door to claims that this was illegitimate. One of the most defining things, if you remember back to election night in 2020, was when Fox called Arizona. When Fox News called Arizona for Joe Biden, that was a body blow to Donald Trump, because it told, ironically, and how weird is this, that like we need Fox News to be at least a semblance of a news organization, because they may be the only ones, if they were able to call this election for Kamala Harris, assuming she wins, if they called it for her, that might be the one thing that would make enough Republicans stop and be like, okay, because that's the news I listen to or watch, and that's who I trust. And if they're telling me Donald Trump lost, I guess he lost. Maybe not all of them, certainly not all of them, but maybe enough of them that would kind of calm the mob would be thinner. But that's definitely more than ever. And that tells you where we're at. Like the fact that who's going to be afraid to actually say what happened. And it goes to also, if you've seen every interview with every Republican official, they are asked, if every state certifies the results, will you accept the results of the election? And like no federally elected Republican will say yes. Like, what the hell? But that's where we're at. So this is all being very carefully orchestrated, kind of in plain sight. They're getting ready to put on a big anti-democracy play, and they're doing the rehearsals and they're building the sets right in front of us. My worry, and this should be your worry, it should be all of our worry, is what is the firewall here, right? How are we going to deal with this? Because I've been talking to some election protection people, and, we've got a plan. I don't know what that is. In some instances I have pretty good ideas, some I don't. And I get that maybe it's not the greatest idea to be out there telling them how you're going to, what you're going to do in response. I can appreciate that. But the key is and obviously this is all prefaced on the fact that the vote is that Kamala Harris wins, that objectively she has won the election. If that is the case, you need to use their playbook, and we cannot concede 1 millimeter for 1 millisecond, because the second you do that, weakness is they will smell that weakness and they will try to roll all over the country. This is not a time for conciliation. This will not be a time for let's talk it out. This will not be a time for, both sides have a valid point. If the numbers are on our side, that's it. And you accept nothing less because, otherwise, why even have elections anymore? If it could just be a contest of who could be the loudest. Well, if elections were a contest of who could be the loudest, I could be running for president right now if you asked anybody in my house or anybody that knows me. But that's for another day. So this is coming. And not only is the election day and the election night stuff going to be an issue, it's everything that comes after it and the threats that are being made to set it up. And we'll get into those soon, with Trump threatening to use the military. And, I'd explain, because we were having a conversation in the kitchen today, I'd explain to my 9-year-old about the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. That's where we're at right now. So, yeah, we're all doom scrolling, right? And we're all terrified. And the difference to me is, and I'll end on this note, this is why it's different. Normally, when people start talking about kind of extreme scenarios and, worrying about the system falling down or falling apart or pointing out the stress points in the system, it's usually the people that are politically astute, experienced, understand the law, understand our political system. They're the ones that talk the other people down, right? They're the ones who are like, okay, I get that theoretically, but this is the way it really works, and this is what'll happen, and it's okay. It's going to be okay. This year, it's the inverse. This year, it's the people that are politically astute and aware and are, either through whatever means they are paying close attention to this for whatever reason, be it their job, be it their hobby, be it that they want to be an informed citizen. They're the ones who are sounding the alarms. That's an entirely different thing. Because when the people that know better are the ones saying it is time to wake up and have your head on a swivel here, people, because this is totally different than anything we've seen in our lifetimes. And the people that are just out there that aren't politically aware, that would just assume not deal with this, and God bless them, and I don't know how anybody at this point could turn away from this, but okay, that's again, a discussion for another day. But when they're the ones saying, oh, you're crazy, you don't know what you're talking about, and they're coming from a place of a lack of knowledge to people with a higher degree of knowledge, that's terrifying. Because not only does that mean people are sounding the alarm, but it means the people aren't hearing it. You see where I'm going with this? All of that to say, as I said at the beginning, as much as we want this all to be over, be ready, because November 5th is not the end of this election. In many ways, it is the beginning. Thank you for listening to Keystone Reckoning Podcast. I have a really cool, I think it's going to be a 2-parter because I'm going to chop it up, a guest interview that'll be coming out next. You're not going to want to miss it. If you like what we're talking about and you want to support it, especially now because we want to get money out in the field to campaigns and to causes, KeystoneReckoning.com. You can make a contribution to the PAC right there. Also visit our sponsor, TrueBlueGear.com. That's TrueBlueGear.com. We've got, we just put out the Trump is a Jagoff shirts for anybody from Western PA, but t-shirts, mugs, hats, all that good stuff, because we have to wear our values. We can't just talk about them. We have to put them out there. So might as well look good while we're doing it. So again, thank you for listening. We'll be back soon. Stay strong, stay informed, and let's stay together.
Well, that's it then. We've saved people the trouble of voting. What's next?
Our point is that it's...
I understood the point. We're going to South Carolina to set up Illinois. When I ask what's next, it means I'm ready to move on to other things. So, what's next?
We're done.
Fantastic.